Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israel comes under international fire for its new settlement bill. A unique statue of Israeli Prime Minister causes a ruckus in Tel Aviv. And feeling hungry? You're not the only one. We'll reveal the incredible ancient food discovery Israeli archaeologists have just made. I'm Natasha Kirchak here with the latest news in Israel. The Knesset bill to retroactively legalize certain West Bank settlements has already strained relations within Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's governing right-wing coalition. And now the proposed law is drawing fire from the international community. The U.S. State Department responded right after Israeli lawmakers gave the bill preliminary approval, saying the potential legalization of thousands of settler homes would be profoundly damaging to the two-state solution. State Department spokesman Mark Toner said Washington hopes the bill won't make it past the 3 more required parliamentary votes to become law, unless it's been significantly modified. The original draft has already been revised after deep disagreement in the ruling Israeli coalition over a clause that would have included the Amona outpost. That section was dropped, and now the court-ordered dismantlement of the West Bank village is set to proceed on December 25th. The 330 Amona settlers are angry. They're now preparing a large protest against the evacuation, but insist there won't be any violence.
אנחנו מתכוונים לעשות כאן מחאה עממית לגיטימית גדולה ורחבה. לא נרים יד על אף שוטר וחייל חלילה, אבל כן יהיה כאן המונים שיבטאו את הכאב הגדול של ארץ ישראל, ואנחנו מקווים שמקבלי ההחלטות יבינו שהציבור לא ייתן ששוב יישוב יהודי אחרי 20 שנה חלילה ייהרס. אפשר להסדיר את היישוב, וזה מה שאנחנו דורשים מהם.
Meanwhile, the bill to legalize the other disputed areas is being described as a land grab by Israeli critics, because the Jewish homes at the heart of the matter were built without proper permits on what turned out to be privately owned Palestinian land. International legal experts are voicing concern over the bill's impact on Israel's standing abroad, but say financial compensation for the rightful owners could serve as a mitigating factor.
It certainly will harm Israel internationally. The mitigating factor is if, and this is the government's decision, full compensation is paid to the Palestinians, and Israel has expressed its willingness to have international observers on a committee or tribunal that would decide what is full and adequate compensation in this case. Evicting thousands of people from land is a problem. Again, as I said, it includes children and families. Therefore, the compromise will be apparently that they'll be allowed to remain on the land, but again, I repeat, full compensation will be paid to the Palestinian landowners.
The drama hasn't even hit full pitch yet. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is concerned the bill, if it becomes law, could lead to prosecution at the International Criminal Court. Various left-wing groups are likely to appeal against the law at the Supreme Court, which has in the past struck down legislation deemed to be in violation of human and civil rights. And last but certainly not least, Ramallah is now demanding the U.S. officially recognize the state of Palestine and support a UN resolution against all Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has long been nicknamed King Bibi for what some would call his royal tendencies and his taste for fine living. But now it looks like the Israeli leader actually had the chance to be a king for a day after a golden statue of him was erected in Tel Aviv's Central Plaza, Rabin Square, last night. It turns out not everyone in the Israeli public was pleased by the display, even though it did attract scores of selfie experts. So, who was behind the creation of the shining statue? His name is Itai Zalait, and he's an Israeli sculptor that likes to use his art to test the limits of freedom of expression in the Jewish state.
We see the diversity between two kinds of people. One is really wants to have this statue in the center of the town, and the other one just want to break it. So this relationship is really interesting.
The 13-foot-tall sculpture of Netanyahu has certainly made an impression, but the question is, what kind of mark has it made? The Israeli art world has been going head-to-head with the Israeli government in what some are referring to as a culture war. As Culture Minister Miri Regev has taken several measures to withhold state funds from institutions that do not express loyalty to Israel. And now Regev is already attacking Netanyahu's new golden statue, which she's calling an expression of hatred towards the Israeli leader. It turns out she's not the only one infuriated by the sculpture.
I think this sculpture came up overnight here. Somebody put it. I think it's horrendous. They shouldn't. Whoever did it, he wanted to give us a political message against Netanyahu. They want to show him as a dictator, and he's not such. I mean, it's horrible what they did here. I think they should take it down. And I'm sure if Netanyahu will see it, he will ask to take it down right away.
Others seem to be enchanted by King Bibi and are using the statue to celebrate their love for the leader.
וואלה, מלך, מה, כאילו? אני באתי דבר ראשון, השתחוויתי, אין, מה? יש לו 30 מנדטים, הוא מלך ישראל, מה? הוא הצליח.
Officials from the Tel Aviv municipality have already ordered Zalit to take down the statue and remove it from the square. They are even threatening to haul it away and fine the sculptor if he does not follow orders, but some Israelis believe Zalit, like all Israelis, should have the right to express and share his artwork in whichever way he pleases.
I think that the most important thing about it is that we have freedom here in Israel, and everybody may say what he wants and what he thinks, and that's the base of it. And here you see just an example of it. Opinions, very good. More opinions, even better.
The deadline for the statue's removal has already expired and King Bibi has already been hauled away. But just before the statue's removal, one man in the crowd took the chance to knock it to the ground amid chants of Bibi go home. The Israeli leader's supporters are accusing, quote, leftists of attacking the statue, but Israelis across the political spectrum are still concerned about how their tax money is being used by the prime minister. Netanyahu and his wife have been the subject of lots of legal scrutiny over whether state funds have been used to support their lavish lifestyle, but both have continued to deny such allegations. ILTV reporter Steve Leibowitz is currently in London attending the International Luxembourg Forum on Preventing Nuclear Catastrophe. On the sidelines of the conference, Steve has just held a special interview with the former director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Hans Blix. And Blix is warning of major danger if the new Trump administration cancels the Iran nuclear deal.
In Israel, there's kind of mixed feelings. During the campaign, we heard Donald Trump talking about the Iran deal being the worst deal ever, how it's going to be thrown away. Here in this conference, we're hearing voices of caution urging him not to. What would you advise President-elect Trump to do?
Well, I think he should be aware that the deal that was reached in Geneva and that was sanctioned and approved by the Security Council of the UN is an agreement and a settlement that the world has legitimized by the action of the Security Council, and that there are ways, if the US want to complain about something, there is a mechanism set up that could be treated certain things. So we have heard minor complaints about Iran not producing and keeping a little more of heavy water than they should have had for a short while. I don't think it was a very significant thing. And I think they have corrected it since then. But I and this group here think that the agreement was a great achievement, and I also read that many of the Israeli security experts feel that it was rather good, and the opposition or skepticism come from political quarters in Israel and in the United States as well. So, what are the alternatives? The alternatives before this was agreed, there were many threats from the US and from Israel too, and if you start bombing, what happens? I mean, as Colin Powell said, if you break the pot, you own it, and I think that's something wise to retain, so I hope it will stay.
On a political level, do you think that Prime Minister Netanyahu can be influenced to urge caution from Trump moving forward?
I have not the slightest idea. I think he had difficult relations with Mr. Obama and better relations with Mr. Trump. But whether he wants to caution that, I don't know at all. I think most of the world would not want to see this agreement unravel. We have so many other things in the field of disarmament unraveling anyways. And we have enough problems on our plates.
Finally, I'd like to ask you this. Here in the conference, people are talking about the alleged Israeli nuclear arsenal. What do you think Israel's role should be in terms of preventing nuclear catastrophe?
Well, Israel has, we all believe, a substantial nuclear stockpile, and that has, I think, caused tremendous stress and disappointment in the Arab world, because Egypt and other countries, when they entered the non-proliferation treaty and committed themselves not to have nuclear weapons, they assumed at the time that Israel also would join. And so this underlies many of their resentments, and there have been years of trying to get a nuclear weapon-free zone, or nowadays a zone free of weapons of mass destruction, and it hasn't succeeded. And I'm not very optimistic that it will succeed, because now I think if I were an Israeli, I'd probably say that the Iranian matter is largely settled. So why bother about this? And but in due course, when political relations in the area can be improved, and there Israelis would probably agree with me, once we have peace, then we can do it. And I think it would be desirable that Israel get rid of its nuclear weapons, yes.
Thank you so much for being with us at ILTV.
Please.
Israel has made the highly unusual decision to allow the delivery of 5 armored vehicles to the Palestinian Authority, and it's all due to increased lawlessness raging in the territory. The Haaretz newspaper is reporting the transfer took place in the dead of night at a border crossing with Jordan, in an overnight mission to get the jeeps to Palestinian security forces. One Israeli official commented that this exceptional permission was granted by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman, in a move to help Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas counter threats to his rule in the northern West Bank. There are reports that Palestinian forces are battling armed gangs in the Balata refugee camp near Nablus and other areas, who Abbas claims are being funded by his exiled rival Mohammed Dahlan. The PA has been trying to remove all the weapons Arab militias used against Israel in the Second Intifada ever since the uprising ended in 2005. But some parts of the West Bank are still believed to be heavily armed. Well, the northern border of Israel is typically pretty quiet. Over the past few weeks, we've heard increasing reports of Israeli intervention in southern Lebanon and Syria. Prime Minister Netanyahu himself has admitted to dozens of such airstrikes in enemy airspace to prevent Iranian arms reaching Hezbollah and other terror groups, and to keep the Islamic State at bay. Joining us today is Reserve Brigadier General Ram Shmueli to discuss the ongoing operations. Thanks so much for coming in.
Hi.
So to begin, you were an Air Force fighter pilot as well as a F-16 squadron and base commander for 30 years. It's a long time. So how complex is it to operate in enemy territory, even if it's just in a neighboring country like Syria or Lebanon?
The issue is that if you have an intelligence fact that something is happening, you have to choose which is the best way to take the airplanes and strike on the spot. Sometimes in the past, when I was a squadron commander, we have to take the airplanes to go above the target. Nowadays, you don't have to go above the target, but still it's a very complicated mission. And luckily, the Air Force know what they do. And if you see in 10 days, we're going to get another F-35 airplane. So we try to develop the system and the way we attack in different way in order to achieve the mission.
Yeah, and for example, the surface-to-surface missile attack from inside Syria last night also took place, right?
First of all, I can't approve or disapprove because the government haven't approved it yet, but let's say that it was not a surface-to-surface or it was using by airplanes. So if you are a squadron commander and you take the 4-ship formation and you take off from one of the bases, and then you have to go above, let's say, about Lebanon or above Israel or about Syria, address the target, get the information accurate, and then to send those missiles in order to hit the target on one hand, but don't make a collateral damage on the other hand. And this is what the people do. I don't know if it is last night, but once in a while, I myself participate in some attacks in enemy territories. So this is the way you get. You got the mission from the headquarters, you have a team, you work on it for a couple of hours, and then you take off.
Right. Now, about how often would you say an attempt to breach Israel from the north is actually made? Because we're reading about this in the news, but is it something that's happening often?
The northern border is very complicated. There is a war there. There is a war in Syria, and in Syria there are many partners and opponents that fight each other. Once in a while, one of the sides believes that if he will threaten Israel, it will help him in the internal conflict. And Israel set red lines in that regard. The red lines are, first of all, if something will leak to Israel, we are going to retaliate very effectively, because we are not part of this kind of mess that's happening in Syria, on one hand. And on the other hand, we are not going to tolerate any kind of shipment of a strategic weapon from Syria to the northern border with Hezbollah, with Lebanon. So the same thing, but at the same hand, we are taking care of wounded from Syria. So we are not part of the war, but humanitarily we are helping the wounded there, and we take thousands of wounded to Israel, take care of them, hospital, and then bring them back to Syria.
Right. Now, how many immediate threats do you believe are facing Israel right now, aside from Hezbollah and ISIS?
It's very complicated, because Iran, they act like a superpower. They think like a superpower, of course, regional superpower. So they are looking for every front. Either it's Hezbollah, they support Hezbollah. If they see something that can happen from the Golan Heights in order to attack Israel, or in order to have some intelligence observation on Israel, they even support Hamas. It's amazing. Hamas are Sunni Islamic, and Iran is Shia Islamic, but they don't care as long as they can do something against Israel in the bigger picture as a regional superpower that they try to be. They do the best.
It's worth it to collaborate.
So
right?
to answer the question, what are the threats? The threat is Iran that mobilizing all the efforts that they can in order to confront Israel.
Now, the IDF just declassified a map of Hezbollah military installations in southern Lebanon. How can Israel be sure of these targets?
The key issue, even if we're talking about the attacks that happened yesterday or about those pictures of 200 targets, is intelligence. Since I was the head of the intelligence, I know what's happening. Once you got a very good intelligence and you get information from inside, you can use it in a variety of ways. For example, when 20 years ago, when I was a squadron commander, so it's not classified anymore, but once I sat in the squadron, I was a squadron commander, and then we got a very dedicated information about a camp of Hezbollah, so we went and attacked it. So the key issue is intelligence. So if we have all the information on all the villages in southern Lebanon, and we are not talking about the civilians, we are talking about military infrastructure inside those civilian houses. So we are not going to wait for, if there is a war, we are not going to attack them, but if there is a war, we know where they're hiding.
Now, does Israel have similar detailed maps for all of the country's neighbors, not just in Lebanon?
The intelligence is doing the best it can in order to bring the information on all the countries around us, of course, and we think what will be the more effective way to hit the enemy as strong as we can. And Israel, unlike superpower like America, we can't afford ourselves 3 years war. We have to do it very quickly because this country is very small. It's like a green glass. You can hit a rock and you break the green glass. So we have to be very efficient and very quick, and this is what the Air Force is doing. And this kind of shipment of F-35, which we are the first country beside America that we have this kind of airplanes, this will add to our capability to threat and deter the enemy, but in case of a war, we're going to hit them in many targets.
Now, assuming these maps are all correct, especially the one that we just saw about the Hezbollah military installations, what should Israel be doing? Because oftentimes these posts are mixed into civilian populations. How does Israel deal with that?
The issue is the question has to be asked to the people who hide weapons inside civilian population. And when we consider to attack those targets in a war, we have to consider what is the alternative of them attacking the Israeli population. And of course, if you share Israel population and Hezbollah population, we want to protect the state of Israel. Nevertheless, we are not going to behave beyond the war laws, the international laws. So we try to make the intelligence information as accurate as we can. And I think that if you see from attacks that we do in Gaza Strip, which is the most dense populated area in the world, we have very few collateral damage if we hit the target very accurate. So this is what we try to do. On one hand, to eliminate the target, but on the other hand, not to hit civilians.
Well, I guess we're just going to see what happens next on the northern border, and hopefully Israel's not going to have to get more involved than it's already been involved
Deterrence
in the Syrian war. Yeah.
And good intelligence.
There you go.
And if you have to fight, you fight.
Great. Thank you so much for coming in. It's always critical for the Jewish state to maintain constant readiness to thwart attacks. Hundreds of Israeli army troops just wrapped up a massive drill on the border with Gaza aimed at testing the IDF's preparedness to confront terror attacks from the Hamas-controlled enclave. Aside from routine Palestinian infiltration attempts, the military exercise was specifically geared toward the protection of southern Israeli communities along the frontier. The units are also preparing the most effective strategies to counter armed Arab motorcyclists. Concern over such a possibility gained momentum after a number of the vehicles were discovered in cross-border tunnels built by the terrorists during the 2014 conflict with Gaza. As part of the latest training, the Israeli soldiers conducted several simulations where some of them assumed the role of Hamas terrorists, using the motorbikes to attack an IDF base. Another exercise was held along Israel's northern border with Lebanon that included the testing of the incoming rocket alert system. For security reasons, we're not allowed to tell you exactly how many security personnel participated in the mass exercise. But we can say that the Air Force, the Navy, police officers, and regional council members took part alongside the hundreds of soldiers. Archaeologists around the world have long wanted to know what ancient people had for dinner, and now their counterparts in Israel have the answer. So Aaron, first off, I'm already getting hungry about this, but what's so important about this discovery?
Well, it's, as a human race and tracing our evolution, it's important to see where we've been to realize where we are and where we're going. And our diet plays a really big part in that. So I don't want to give away too much, but this is a remarkable find.
All right, let's check out the report that you did.
The Times of Israel is reporting that scientists in the Jewish state have a grocery list that's about 780,000 years old. While most experts have only been able to dig up bones or shells left over from prehistoric barbecues, Israeli archaeologists have solved the riddle over the salad and side dish portion of the meal. Over 100,000 fragments of edible food have been unearthed from the shores of an ancient lake in northern Israel, almost miraculously preserved by the once waterlogged soil. 55 different types of fruits, seeds, nuts, roots, and vegetables dating back to the Pleistocene era were collected from the site, which archaeologists believe was continuously inhabited by humans for more than 50,000 years. The residents were found to have actually enjoyed a rather gourmet paleo diet, featuring water chestnuts, almonds, pears, and raspberries, in addition to whatever animals or fish they were able to catch. There is also evidence of controlled fire and plants that were toxic unless heated, meaning that the chefs were actually cooking their vegetables, and in case you're wondering, these foods are prepared by our ancestors about 39,000 generations ago. Masah Israel is home to the widest variety of immersive international experiences for Jewish young adults 18 to 30. Find the right study abroad internship, service learning, or Jewish studies program to help you grow as a person, a professional, and a leader. while also developing a robust global professional network that includes Israelis and Jews from around the world.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Yesterday, a controversial statue was erected in the heart of Tel Aviv titled King Bibi, and it was meant to poke fun at Prime Minister Netanyahu's policies as well as test the limits of free speech in Israel. Well, while Israel isn't a monarchy, kings have indeed played an important role in Israeli and Jewish history. So today's word is melech, or king. Some of the most famous melachim, or kings, in history have come out of the Judean and Israeli kingdoms. Two of the most famous, of course, are the biblical melachim HaMelech David, or King David, and HaMelech Shlomo, or King Solomon. In modern Hebrew, since we have no king, melech is used more as a praise. So if your friend goes out of his way for you, for example, you could say ata melech, or you're a king, to show your appreciation. Now, while we often look back on the melachim of this world as giants walking among men, let's not forget that not every king has a sparkling legacy. And remember that you don't even have to be royal to be a melech. After all, as the great 16th century Italian poet and playwright Pietro Aretino once said, "I am indeed a melech because I know how to rule myself." All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast.
ILTV's weather forecast is sponsored by Adopt a Savta, taking care of Israel's lonely Holocaust survivors.
Tonight should be partly cloudy with a chance of light rain along the coast and a low of 53 or 12 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect more of the same, but with an additional drop in temperatures to a high of 68 or 20 degrees Celsius. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.82 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching and see you tonight.